Welcome back to Fables Adventures. Thanks again for being here. We're excited to bring you today's episode. We've really been enjoying creating and sharing stories like these with you, and we hope that you've been enjoying them just as much. Subscribe to our channel and continue to follow us for daily episodes of short stories from our collection. For today's story, we meet Evan Threshold, a teen astronomer with a special gift. 17-year-old Evan Threshold has always heard patterns in the night sky that no one else can. But when a mysterious signal from Kepler 442b resolves into a desperate alien plea for help, Evan becomes the sole bridge between Earth and a dying civilization known as the Teryn. The aliens need a rare mineral buried beneath Starlight Ridge, directly under sacred Ute Nation land. As government agents close in and the Terran's time runs out, Evan must navigate an impossible choice: save an alien species or protect the ancestral ground he's been unknowingly transmitting from. What follows is a powerful story of first contact, Indigenous sovereignty, and a teenager discovering that listening to the stars comes with responsibilities far greater than he ever imagined. With the Ute Nation stepping forward to lead the world's first extraterrestrial collaboration, Evan learns that connection, across cultures, across worlds, is strongest when it's built on respect. Again, we are grateful that you've joined us here. Give us a follow and share with your friends. And if you're enjoying what we're creating and would like to create stories of your own, download our Fables Adventures app on the Apple App Store. We've provided the link in the description. Enjoy today's story, and we will see you again tomorrow.
Evan Threshold stood at the edge of the observation deck, his telescope pointed toward a patch of sky that most people would dismiss as empty. But Evan had never been most people. At 17, he'd already spent more nights under the stars than some astronomers managed in a lifetime, and he'd developed an ability that he couldn't explain to anyone. Not his parents, not his two closest friends, not even the astrophysics professors at Starlight Ridge College who mentored him. He could hear them. The aliens, not with his ears, but somewhere deeper, in the part of his brain that processed mathematics and patterns and the fundamental frequencies of existence itself. The signal had started 3 months ago, a rhythmic pulse hidden within background radiation patterns that everyone else's equipment filtered out as noise. Evan's modified receiver, built from salvaged satellite components and obsessive tinkering, had caught it. And then came the moment that changed everything, when the pulse resolved into something like language, something like a desperate cry for help reaching across the void. Starlight Ridge sat high on a desert plateau, surrounded by canyons carved by ancient water and older still by time itself. The town existed in that rare pocket of darkness where the night sky dominated the landscape with such overwhelming presence that artificial light seemed obscene. Evan had chosen this place specifically for his astronomy because of that darkness. He'd had no idea that the darkness would choose him back. His hands trembled as he adjusted the frequency modulation on his transmission device. The aliens, they came from Kepler 4442b, a planet circling a star 90 light-years away, though their signal suggested they'd been reaching out to this solar system for decades, centuries even, waiting for someone to listen. The Teryn, they called themselves, and they were dying. "Evan, where are you?" His friend Maya's voice crackled through his phone, distant and slightly annoyed. "You missed dinner. Your mum's worried." He stared at the screen for 3 seconds before responding, compartmentalizing with the ease that had become his strange superpower. "Lost track of time at the observatory. I'll be home by 11. It was a lie wrapped in partial truth, the kind he'd become expert at constructing. The observatory was where he was. Yes, but not the college facility, where Maya and his other friends assumed he spent his nights. This observatory was different. It was the ancient one, the ceremonial site that had belonged to the Anasazi people centuries ago and still held significance to the Ute Nation, whose descendants maintained cultural stewardship of the land. Evan had discovered the site by accident while hiking the canyon trails. The rock formations arranged in precise astronomical alignments, the carved symbols that documented celestial events with accuracy that shouldn't have been possible. He'd realized then that his gift, this ability to communicate with distant worlds, wasn't unprecedented. The ancients had known something too. They'd listened to the same sky. He'd chosen to set up his transmitter here, in a hidden alcove behind crumbling stone structures that tourists never found, partly because the site amplified his signal in ways he didn't understand, partly because he couldn't shake the feeling that he was continuing work that had been started long before him. The transmission came through at 11:47 p.m., just as Evan was beginning to shut down his equipment for the night. The Teryn's communications had become more urgent over the past month, and tonight they were almost frantic. Evan threshold, the pattern resolved into his mind, translated by his own neural processing into something his consciousness could grasp. We are grateful for your presence, but we must speak of impossible choices. Evan settled into the chair he'd hidden here, surrounded by notebooks filled with star charts and coded conversations. What's happened? Our civilization is failing. A plague, a genetic degradation, a slow entropy. We calculated decades ago that we could not survive without intervention. We have searched for a world where a specific mineral exists, an element we need to synthesize, the compound that will save us. We found only one place, your world, beneath the location where you transmit. Evan's stomach dropped. He knew what was coming before the signal continued. The mineral exists in vast quantities under Starlight Ridge. We need you to help us extract it. We can guide the process remotely. We can do this, Evan, but only if you allow it. He sat in silence for a long moment, listening to the desert wind move through the canyon. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, a sound that belonged to this land, that had been born from this land, that carried the weight of centuries. I need time to think, he sent back. We do not have time, the Teryn responded, not unkindly. Our window is closing. Evan left the observatory just after midnight, climbing back up the trail towards Starlight Ridge proper. The town itself was a small collection of buildings clustered around the college campus and a handful of residential streets, most of the population concentrated within a few blocks. His house was on the northern edge, a modest adobe-style home his parents had bought when his father took a job at the college's administrative office. He should have gone straight home. Instead, he found himself walking toward the tribal cultural center, a building he'd visited only once before during a school field trip. The lights were off, the parking lot empty, but the front doors weren't locked. Evan slipped inside, guided by a vague impulse he didn't entirely understand. The center contained exhibits documenting Ute history, artifacts, photographs, oral histories recorded in video format. But what drew Evan was a room in the back, one marked Astronomical Legacy. It contained star charts from centuries ago, documented with remarkable precision. Meteor showers recorded on specific dates, the precession of the equinoxes, a map of the night sky annotated with notes in both Ute and English. One placard caught his eye. Our ancestors understood that the heavens spoke to those who knew how to listen. The observatory at the canyon site was built over 800 years ago as a place of communion with the stars. The Ute Nation maintains this site as sacred ground, a space where the boundary between Earth and cosmos grows thin. Evan's hands shook as he read, "The Ute Nation, sacred ground," and he was transmitting alien communications from that exact location without permission, without consent, without any understanding of what it meant to use land that didn't belong to him. He was still reading when the security guard found him at 1 in the morning. The man, a Ute elder named Robert Whitehorse, who worked part-time at the center, recognized him. "You're the threshold boy," Robert said, not unkindly, "the one who's always looking at stars." Evan's carefully constructed compartments began to crack. Yes, I was interested in the astronomical information. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to break in." Robert studied him for a moment, then gestured for him to sit. "Come on, let's talk." They sat in the dark, in a room full of ancient star charts, and Evan found himself telling this stranger things he'd told no one. Not everything. He kept the Teryn secret, kept the transmissions close. But he talked about his gift, about the way the night sky spoke to him, about the feeling of being watched from above, about the weight of knowledge that didn't fit into his normal life. Robert listened without interrupting. When Evan finished, the old man stood and walked to a window that looked out toward the dark canyons beyond town. "The ancients understood something," Robert said quietly. "The universe is alive. It communicates, if you know how to listen. My people have always known this. We've always seen ourselves as part of something larger. And we've always understood that with that connection comes responsibility. When you listen to the stars, you don't just gain knowledge, you gain obligations." The weight of those words settled on Evan like gravity itself. 3 days later, Evan stood in an unmarked van on the outskirts of Starlight Ridge, surrounded by equipment that didn't belong to him. The Federal Space Agency had arrived quietly, setting up surveillance stations in the mountains around the town. Agent Sarah Chen, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s, had been closing in on his signal for weeks. She knew someone was transmitting on unauthorized frequencies. She just hadn't realized yet that the transmitter was answering back. It was only a matter of time before she found him. Evan's phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Hey, haven't seen you in forever. Movie tonight?" He stared at the message. The normal world, the world of friendship and teenage life and simple choices, felt impossibly distant. He was living 2 lives now, and both were spiraling toward a convergence he couldn't prevent. That night, he returned to the Canyon Observatory. The Terran signal was waiting, more desperate than ever. "We have calculated that you have 72 hours before your government discovers your location," they transmitted. "After that, we will lose you. The extraction must begin now." Evan closed his eyes. In his mind, he could see the canyon, the ancient stone formations, the sacred ground that his people had desecrated by existing on it without permission. He could also see the Terran, a civilization 9 light years away, slowly dying while he hesitated. "I can't do this alone," he transmitted back. "I need to talk to the Ute Nation. I need permission." A long silence. Then, "There is no time for permission." "Then I have to make time," Evan sent. "Because I'm not going to be responsible for destroying something sacred to save something I don't fully understand. If your civilization can't survive without that, then maybe there's something in that equation I'm missing." He shut down the transmitter before they could respond, before he could second-guess himself. Then he walked back up to town and knocked on Robert Whitehorse's door at 2 in the morning. Robert answered dressed, as though he'd been expecting this. Perhaps, Evan thought, the old man understood the patterns too. "I need to talk to your tribal council," Evan said, "tonight, and I need to tell them everything." The next 36 hours became a blur of conversations that spiraled outward from Robert's home like ripples in water. The tribal council convened in emergency session. Evan's parents learned the truth and reacted with a combination of confusion and concern that he'd never quite seen before. Maya and his other friends learned that the boy they thought was just a devoted astronomer was living in a secret world they'd never suspected existed. And through it all, Agent Chen and her team closed in, triangulating his signal, searching the canyons with equipment and patience. What they didn't expect was the coordination that came next. The Ute Nation, after hearing Evan's story and understanding the full scope of the situation, made a decision. They would allow the extraction to proceed, but under their supervision and on their terms. They would preserve and protect the sacred site while saving the Teryn civilization. They would document the process, demand that the Federal Space Agency acknowledge Ute authority over their ancestral lands, and use this moment of cosmic contact to reassert their rights and their presence in a world that had tried to erase them. When Agent Chen finally found Evan, she discovered him working alongside tribal members and Ute Nation scientists, all of them coordinating with the Terran civilization to begin a careful, respectful extraction process. The ancient observatory wasn't being destroyed. It was being transformed into something new, a place where human and alien science could work together, where indigenous knowledge and extraterrestrial technology could merge, where the boundary between Earth and cosmos became not a barrier, but a bridge. "You're under federal jurisdiction," Chen said, approaching Evan with her credentials displayed. "No," said a woman Evan hadn't met before, introducing herself as the Ute Nation's liaison to state government. "He's under tribal jurisdiction. This is our land. These are our people, and we've decided to welcome this contact, carefully and on our terms." Agent Chen's face hardened, but behind her eyes, Evan saw something shift, a recognition that this wasn't going to be the simple first contact scenario the government had imagined. This was messier, more complicated, more real. Over the following weeks, Evan became the translator between worlds. He worked with tribal scientists to understand how the extraction could be done sustainably, how the Terran could receive the mineral they needed while the sacred site remained protected. The Federal Space Agency had to negotiate with the Ute Nation for any access to the process. News of alien contact spread, but it came wrapped in a story about Indigenous sovereignty and the power of communities who'd been listening to the stars all along. On a clear night, in his 17th year, Evan stood at the ancient observatory with Robert Whitehorse looking up at the sky. "Does it feel different?" the old man asked. "Now that you're not carrying it alone?" Evan thought about the weight he'd felt for months, the crushing isolation of secret knowledge, the feeling of being watched from above. All of that was still there in some form, but it had been transformed into something else, something shared, something communal, something that connected him not just to the stars above, but to the people around him. "Yes," he said, "it feels like I'm finally part of something bigger than myself." Robert smiled, and together they turned their instruments toward the night sky, listening for the signals that bridged worlds.